Although through the years, there are people that I never tried to contact who made confessions on my street years apart. And one thing they all have tied is ties to Tucker Carlson's college, Trinity College, is involved with a bunch of people, little kids and adults. When I was a kid, now I was an adult. A Joshua Stryker has roles with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and with sexual and medical offenders of kids, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders. In fact, I never had a word of conversation with a Joshua Stryker in my life. Never had a class with him. In other words, he's involved with sequence shift, non-verbally confirming it in a time where I was going to be walking, years apart, as people involved before the World Trade Center attack, in the World Trade Center attack, and since it. WFSB recorded this by faking conversations with me about the World Trade Center attack, with the people involved, intercities with them. There were also collusions with their intelligence and their sources all along Route 3. And they have retired judges and their family members, and prosecutors and their family members, and victims advocates involved with sexual medical offenders of kids, elderly. They have overt criminal enterprises, private ones. This breaching method showed them how to read the law. This breaching method abused them first at the campuses for which were actually recorded. So, in other words, the news is offensively pretending passions and emotions about what names people call each other because they have wire crime acts and methods with collusions with that. There are intelligence families that are Jewish themed, like named Mike Levine. Mike Levine was brought up by the principal child abuser as one of the names, whose name was Jim B. And I caught him with worse than they put him in prison for. And his prison was collusions with a harassment complaint against me. I never even got to speak. They kept calling back and making me all kinds of confessions, confirmations, and saying fake things, and then switching names and then leaving requests for more calls back, all kinds of messages on machines and things. They hid that. All kinds of federal evidences, crimes, and people involved with the police chiefs and police forums, intercities, and their kids, putting fake motivations with the interbranch, putting their kids for fake motivations with the news, planting a fake. The news is putting fake conversations with me, put fake ties to me. There's an O'Neill family involved with Phil Cololo, involved with more sexual and medical offenders, with the O'Neill family, with the students and the intelligence families, foreign and domestic, involved with overt criminal enterprise, even they don't realize it. In other words, what's she doing? She got her an O'Neill family have their little daughter, and a Lombard and a people with the name Lombard, but also people with the name Leahy. A Leahy family has their little daughter on Facebook, involved with people with rape threats and all their natures of federal evidence is crimes with the Leahy family who faked conversation with me through the mail to other people at the Harvard Hospital. I never had a word of conversation with in my life. And one of my one sarcastic word, they won't get on paper because he contorted his body behind me. All kinds of federal evidence is crimes. And with people with the houses and businesses next to Harvard Hospital and the different positions there. All kinds of criminally foreign influence roles in the Wethersfield Community Center has something to do with their roles in the World Trade Center predicate acts of WFSB, refusing to identify with police and courts, refusing to identify themselves legitimately. I've asked Judge Napolitano many times to get them on paper, one name in sequence. Get me up for fake conversations at the Wethersfield police station. They pretended when I was a kid and when I was an adult. It wasn't at all. And when I was an adult, I found out about the kid one because they pretended that through the news too. They have a lot of live questions to hide. Whole bunch of people tied to a Mark Violet. And a Mike Violet, I never had a word of conversation with Mike Violet. Never tried to contact them. They sought me out on my street to plant evidences since I was a kid with their roles with names next to the state capitol and careerly involved with next to Trinity College. And at Trinity College with this Joshua Stryker too, they brought up in their confessions with the corners of the streets involved and the names involved with the people from my grammar school, with people I never even had classes with. that were bubble identity theft, fraud, slaves, planting evidences, same ones increasingly with wire crime acts and methods with multiple police departments, not just the Wethersfield police, and retired police chiefs and their intimate ties tied to the same house. And where they move from. Increasingly, their collusions with the with state judicial branch officers and corrections officers used remotely criminally foreign influence. We have black pupils, whites of eyes to discern this. And during James Madison's plan caused the Declaration of Independence. Mike Levine is they're using these as tools. They're fake. They're not true. Follow me into the law for them. Fox News, get me off a fake conversation with WFSB. These are the intelligence next to your locations as people involved with all sides of criminal and civil cases already. And the interbranch, they already put the same sequence shifts, the same relative delusions, and fake transcripts, self-guided collusions. Everyone's speaking through other force. You guys know what? You guys are directing the judicial branch as the American history expert lean. American history experts have obligations to have everyone understand why and how our founders wanted nothing to do with slavery. And they wanted nothing to do with, but they had to leave it and direct us to understand that our founders are unknown as the plural force that was behind James Madison, that enabled him and their plan, to them everyone to use his plan to counter extort people and force people to break the laws that no one would break because it was against the law. You know, everyone was being tortured, extorted, and enslaved. Everyone was a collusion against each other that was measured and maintained by overt criminal enterprise, private ones, terrorists, or internationally monitored conversations. They had slavery entrenched northern South rules. All the records were criminally foreign influence, therefore. That's what our founders left us to declassify and communicate for themselves. That's why our founders wanted nothing. You don't vote on slavery. Yeah, that's why they have music playing in the background, while they're speaking about history. They use that phrase. They use to sense for the breaching method, self-guided role, sensing for itself. Everyone's sensing for itself when you guys use shotgun all by when you hear it used hunter-gatherer. Already, this breaching method had been sustained on countries A through Z. But before Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, before religious messengers were born, already the breaching method got names A through Z to blame other things, others or ourselves, for what it caused and sustained upon them and sustains upon us. We're like the World Trade Center attack, effectively used to pull off everyone using words like extremism and radical, where originally and still all sides of criminal and civil cases, the experts on the names of the people, the sciences, American history is supposed to understand this. How James Madison's plan forced the Declaration of Independence, forced the Constitutional Convention, and everyone had to put fake things about themselves in databases, or they would have been censored because there were layers of interest sensing it, or they would be in trouble. That's the way it was. Because this breaching method had that power, because everyone's defending and pretending they could speak for a reason, practical real or truth, while we are systems tactical ulterior from the human species body of individual bodies, that by that which is generating all group differences, like why birds have two eyes, fish have two eyes. They have quality aspects in nature distinct but non-distinct and simultaneous, but also per that which is neither us nor them, while it is all things anyway. In many pray. And the ancients were revealed English to be taught this way. See alpha as one of the root words in the word alphabet, and see omega as O stands for omega. Every letter spells out a word, and every word spells out a sentence. And M stands for mother, the 13th letter, the middle letter. That which both the alpha letters, A through M, and the omega letters, M through Z, which they are. And this is how English was revealed to be taught. Not just more probably. This is a better way to explain it, too. You guys have everything skewed because you cannot discern properly why, how nature itself is showing us that its identity binds the sciences, and is why and how the predicate act is valued as a phrase by the law while the predicate is valued as a phrase. I mean, as a word by English, as a word hyperadditional, as a hyperadditional name for a verb. Why and how we need to appreciate a hyperadditional name for a verb is because of this hyperadditional identity of simultaneous nature, this distinct identity of simultaneous nature that is not our species' body, is not the other species' bodies, but while it is all things out anyway. And this is how we could discern it. The need to discern the scientific value that also shows us its body itself is the value, that which is all things at once, well, not by any way. And it is value being that way because it shows us the parts of itself are inseparable from any part of itself because the rest of its complete nature. Just like a cell of your body, a tip of your hair, has a semi-nature relationship to your complete identity. You drop on the ground and walk away. And that has a semi-nature relationship through the species body to itself as a quality diffusion where we could ignore nature's system, individually grouped it together. We could all agree to in positive. Oh, we all agree. But we're ignoring a nature's system. It will still demonstrate to us with negative value nature progressions, acts in nature. Honest science would have revealed the suburbs were designed before America's founders were born, designed for a torture, extortion, factory nature, slavery method that they communicated about and James Madison had communicated to us. They knew that we were going to break out of things like slavery. No one wanted rules with that. And you don't vote on slavery without being sensed. If you're voting on it, you're not capable of speaking for the Constitution unabridged. There's a debate about slavery. It's not about the slavery. It's about the fake. It's about the fake, with the subject treatments and the exceptions. Nature would have shown how to cause negative, positive value nature progressions. Actually, everything was designed to unfold the way it did by a torture, extortion, slavery method that stayed entrenched. We're supposed to appreciate the Civil War, not about them fighting and a breaching method left out. If anyone spoke up about slavery outside of internationally monitored conversations in the North or the South, even after we became a country, they were sentenced. This breaching method hurt women just for that. The breaching method knew that everyone doesn't want to hurt women. Everyone comes from the mother. Breaching method know that everyone doesn't want roles with slavery. Breaching method know that everyone doesn't want roles with buying fish that has mercury in it, when we could better than free have perfectly clean foods, cheap, and you get better cooking, available things. Oh, but it's, they want to go back and forth with things in courts that left out exceptions and left out the collusion/us, the names of the people the science had, with the people countering them too originally and still. There's a witch trials place at one of the founding locations, next to one of the founding locations in Old Wethersfield. And so as one of the founding locations, but at one additional to a web house, it was Web House with no just Web House. Now it is renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. Then and now it had and has other communicated for that place than our founders left to be communicated for that place. Places like that across the country have other communicated for our founders who are unnamed and directed us to understand why and how they had to hide their names. There was a breaching method sensing everyone through each other. Collusions to an extent, everyone pretending other. Everyone pretended they had free speech to an extent. Otherwise, they were sensed, and that was adapted to, including if that body was a majority of people, including if it was an entire country. And this is more probable and practical, and two, relative to where and how that worse than criminal incompetence left out the relativity / hyper-relativity of criminal insidiousness nature itself through history and relative criminally foreign influence databases at countries A through Z since before religious messages were born. The campus martius of the republic for which we stand, and the pantheism which teaches to discern through its own ism too, because it shows that nature is a body that is hyper invisible but still discernible distinctly from how it is invisible but still discernible. The parts of speech have names, therefore they are about the invisible but still discernible. But why and how we need to appreciate more than one word for a verb, for example, is about the hyper invisible but still discernible. Why and how there's something that's too finite for us while it's active and too grouped and too massive, and while being too massive, that comes with how we could only appreciate subjects finite, individual, grouped and or active, and simultaneous and or progressive to an extent /s. And it comes with how we could discern that. We could discern the extent of that which is greater than us, more finite than us, and with active relativity to us, while not as us, but as all things anyway. And as the value of its complete identity of relationship to itself, but that's also positive here, or as our special difference, as Earth, but distinctly from Earth, as if forced from here, as least of Hadith. And the only reason we have self-value rolls with it now is because of how the breaching method made everyone rolls, speaking about economics and money, and subjects treatment is relative, but leaving out exceptions exception. Nature, and such as itself, the breaching method, for example, itself. You guys were not supposed to, you guys have self-value collusion /s, right where you don't self-value collusions. But it's discernible. You have self-value collusions with framing our founders because you don't know how to respond because you came through campuses sickly distinctly, but sickly non-distinctly. The best ones, the worst ones, the difference of that too. They were the Brishi method already showed everyone. They have to high use /s for that collusion /s. You guys are child abuse, all right. Just don't deny it, and it's not all right. And don't hide and pretend that the news doesn't realize. You just can't call them up because they'll change your fake what we say over the phone. They change your fake. They already hit fake letters, fake digital. Whole bunch of people with this intercities, intra-cities, and people with the town lines. These not legitimate roles, whole careers with governments A through Z. So we're going to have to forget past that with the issues treatment, with the subject treatments. Get me off the conversation with WFSB about the World Trade Center attack after it, that instantly recorded their collusions before the World Trade Center attack, and since it, with people who also made confessions tied to the World Trade Center attack. They didn't say a World Trade Center attack was going to happen there. Well, they don't even know themselves. But obviously, but they made relative confessions and brought it up when they had to hide live progression relative to how I recorded them needing to hide live progression and what motivated that. Increasingly, a former Mayor Gold and his family, a Debbie Gold and a Lee Gold, are brought up in confessions to me. But there are proofs that people are doing that to them too. Like but there are proofs that is most probable too, that well, to an extent, there's a former Mayor Gold who has been planting fake ties, fake natures of ties to me, and trying to make fake exceptions, like with a Joseph Aiello and others have been planting evidences next to a Millwoods Park through time. Eric Jensen and others said they have roles on Meadowgate Street with people that work at the campuses. People I never had teachers I never had. And teachers I never had conversations with. And in other words, my campus recorded, confessed, demonstrate, confirmed. From off campuses, there were people that were influencing them to put fake things in databases, and they didn't want to do it. And those people are increasingly the people that were brought up with the child abuser principle and World Trade Center attack roles at the same time. These are also people with the board of the state corrections offices, conjunctions to it and next to it, even next to it or conjunctions to it to that, with the differences of guilt, collusion slash S roles. So this breaching method keeps other things, others ourselves, blamed where it is the thing to blame. And these are people that brought themselves up or courted doing that, forcing other things, others themselves. These are a bunch of people at New Britain Superior Court have roles with an 80 Carrollsville Drive and people tied to them with the name Smith, like on a street over, and others through time with Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, has a bunch of foreign and domestic intelligence involved with differences rackets, and then cover up of their roles with uses of difference and demonstrate nature demonstrates, but the breaching method shows them that. So they use their religious differences or the religious differences of others. They use their physical differences. They even use their sexual differences and the families and people associated with the clubs that are sexually themed next to the campuses. They have collusions pretending passions and emotions interbranch with those names, planting evidences at crime scenes collusions and next to them, including with the news when they're not even covering crime scenes. They're preemptively, they're hiding use of location /s. They're only capable of doing such. Per the breaching method that was entrenched since before our founders were born. Now it reassigns. Everyone has self-valued roles when you replace what people have as evidence, because we have black people's rights of eyes. We have means to discern that these experts that are calling other people's names, it's because they're pretending things that they need to offensively pretend things are debatable that are not, or pull people into debates to pull them off with what came first. Like Fox News has ongoing predicate acts against me with a bunch of intelligence next to them, like people named Mendez and Domain. Domain yelled out sexual things about Allison Mulcahy on Hangdog Lane years ago. They're trying to make it look like I was tied to make a fake exception of me knowing of Rick Cianfaglione, because he had been influenced to put fake things in databases with people from the Britain Superior Court named Brian Silver, who's also involved with the district court people, and FBI Director Robert Luskin, and his co-defendants and their family members, who are also involved with their neighbors with sexual and medical offenders of kids, and family members of probate court judges that are involved sickly with elderly homes, veterans, sickly with hospitals. They're putting fake uses of drugs and alcohols in databases. It's why they stay so stupid with these topics. Not like they care about marijuana. Meanwhile, they have synthetic drugs and gas stations. In other words, and they have in other words, that's why they have all disgusting pot in Connecticut too. And these are people that knew about that years ago before it. Like people involved with Eric Jensen, his neighbors, have roles with probate court judges with sexual medical offenders of kids on my street, tied to a Phil Cololo. And people they say is their cousin too, named Scalora. One of them said that. And DeMoro said that Scalora is their cousin too. A bunch of people named Scalora have a Fred Guzet, who's also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed by people with the schools involved with some sexual medical offenders of kids, and people tied to a John Maiano. People brought him up because of his roles with a modern pastry and planting evidences at corners of streets. With WTC's sources did this too, and on and off the campuses with people more involved with the. And there's a Lance Cuddy. I never saw him on the inside of campus in my life. Only time I ever saw him in real life is at Alina's Pizza on Park Street, and it's involved with them with planting evidences with people with Saudi Arabia that were forced tricked her. But my friend caught it. She's my friend from Saudi Arabia. In other words, they kept forcing her collusions with people that were involved with the legal case next to the World Trade Center, the day of the World Trade Center attack. And outside my hotel room the night before, she wasn't with me. I was with my parents. They were in the hotel next to mine. And when I walked out the door, a Claudia Scalera was there. I never had a word of conversation with her in my life. Her brother, or her brothers and her cousins are reportedly people named DeMorrow and other people named Scalera. They have some sexual medical offenders who planted evidence on fake ties to me since I was a kid on my street, as people who didn't even go to my campuses too, who also did this collusions with the people that went to my campuses I didn't have classes with. Ones I had classes with, I didn't even talk to them there. In other words, increasingly educators of the house/S further involved with the principal child abuser. They are involved with a whole bunch of people planted evidence on all sides of my house. And they have multiple police departments that are forging names and switching names, and that make confessions about them switching names with falsified police reports for the same arrest. And these are increasingly people with all kinds of direct and indirect collusions and organized crimes with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, where they pretend they have the right to lie where they don't. You have to get them on paper, one name in sequence. Please. Judge Napolitano, please, someone tell him. That proof says they're hiding from, or the head came first. They brought this up. I've been asking since before the World Trade Center attack, people from Harper Courts and the Brits. I didn't know they were with the Harper Court, the ones who brought up the Harper Court after the World Trade Center attack. They confessed it. The Harper Court and former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, people from the Connecticut District Court, and people from the Brent Superior Court had collusion/S intercities with people at West Hartford locations. A Joseph Dennis also has federal evidences crimes of people tied to a former Mayor Gold and in Wethersfield locations associated with people named Gold and his family, Debbie Gold and Lee Gold, per him non-verbally. I never have trying to they put fake things in databases with them. And a bunch of people, like Anthony Agman is too, involved with sexual medical offenders of kids. And educators I had that are involved with him with that. I don't know. I never had a conversation when there was me and 3 other kids in that class. One of them was reportedly a relative of Congressman Larson. And one of them was Mike DeMay, who's one of the ones with these Mendez brothers and people next to Fox Connecticut News in Hartford, Connecticut, who has also collusions with some Jew syntax, with my female algebra teacher when I was sophomore, who faked ties to, who repeated sexual things about a girl who lived, I never even met her, who used to live diagonally from me. I believe that's their family still there. And they're involved with some fire departments and some problems with smoke. The American smoke, they made smoke come reverse through my chimney. And they have roles with some Mendez police and people with the name Carone too, with the FBI director Robert Luskin, and people at Central Connecticut State University in the Britain, Connecticut, and next to the networks. There's a Perone family and there's a Kerr family too, that are with the spots next to Hartford Hospital, next to Hartford Hospital, and next to Fox Connecticut News. Collusions with predicate acts with the news people too. These are people next to the news locations with and as intelligence families that are being and have been used remotely, criminally foreign influence, while tactically delusions wrought. And while roles with abuse is multi-front of elderly, of little kids, and of veterans, and people on their differences. Those differences were attacked multi-front. These are not, you see discern how the veterans' homes look just like those buildings in the background of rap videos. And don't leave that out of context with how the torture, extortion, fact, human nature, slavery method that was entrenched before our founders were born as a method that the suburbs were designed to cause negative value nature progressions, acts and natures as that identity of a relationship to ground that causes it. Nature demonstrates it. More and more people need the resources from other locations through the breaching method. All the roles with it too. If we blame it, we're blaming the victims of it too. We can't leave out the breaching method or we'll get it wrong. If we leave it out and let everyone to keep the blame, we'll get it wrong too. You guys can't follow mandated law. You need to, regarding people's predicate act, when people mention predicate acts with facts. I'm not even a lawyer. replacing what nature communicates with black pupils, whites of eyes, and what our founders communicated about the breaching method, how it had the laws against everyone's differences. So there would be no nature of unity, no nature of independence capable of defending itself syntactically or speaking for other people syntactically and of overcoming the breach, the torture, extortion method. No, staying roles with need to screen it more and more too at A through Z countries, blaming only capable of blaming other things other than self. They cannot follow mandated law, even for World Trade Center predicate acts. Get me off the fake conversations with the world with WFSB. Get them on paper and have them stop leaking, because that's what we're going to do. Because the map is what they brought up. Mike Pandoff and others along Route 3 sought me out. Will court confess, demonstrate Brown. I don't even know all their names. I know Police Chief Centron is one of them, I'm learned. And they have a whole bunch of other countries involved here. And these are people with differences, all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slander. Two, a Mike Pandoff and Eric Jensen were influenced by the intelligence community to make things up to me about me to Nicola Jett. I don't know her at all. I never got to talk to her. I don't know her. Nicola Jett, they're making up things to her. Get them on paper, one name in sequence, the FBI director. And two, if you don't want to get the FBI director, get me off the fake conversation with the Wethersfield police and the Britain Superior Court, and that will bring it up because they have collusions with those names personally and professionally. Judge Napolitano, do what's right. They have their Facebook page with Fox News, won't respond. They won't identify themselves legitimately into branch. I've been asking you guys since before the World Trade Center attack. And you have all kinds of predicate acts on my campuses that you could observe and that you're hiding though. But you're hiding, cover your ears and go, oh, this will heal the world. All those countries have people here involved with this. All kinds of differences, rackets. That's why they can't afford to have discerned what it says at the beginning of the Old Testament or what it says at the beginning of the Quran. Because they have sequence shift colors and the difference of collusion between the people attacking the differences or the people helping them. There are collusions with that difference use /S2. Look, discern all that's tied to where and how you guys have self-guided roles, preventing people from using what's hyper-evidential with black people's rights of eyes alone, let alone once we're all on the same page on what James Madison properly should have had communicated for him by the experts on him. Get them on paper, one name in sequence, interbranch, and the news. Either one first. And then we'll bring in the other countries they brought in at the same time and worse.